Last week I mentioned about the minhag of reading from the Tana Devei Eliyahu. So I noticed the famous story, which I heard already when I was in junior school from Rabbi Cousin, about Avraham Avinu being thrown into the fire and the whole story. So that is actually in great detail in the end of Tana Devei Eliyahu, in Tana Devei Eliyahu Zuta, in the last, it's like about 3 pages long. And the whole idea that he had a standoff with Nimrod, and Nimrod said that he's the controls the whole universe. And Avram said, okay, if you're in control, if you can make sure that the sun should rise in the west and set in the east, then I'll accept what your claim. Anyway, and then the Terach, the reason why Terach left Haran was because of the problems which he had with the persecution. He was worried that there'd be more repercussions, and that's why he left and went away from Haran to Or-Kasdim, from Or-Kasdim to Haran. Sorry. Okay, let's go on to our questions, which we have. Someone asked me at the beginning of the week, what's the significance of the colors of the rainbow? And so we have here, it's very interesting that today in Shul, between Mincha and Ma'ariv, we were learning the Maimer from Tov Shin Mem Gimel, and talks all about the rainbow and how the rainbow has got a negative side but has got a positive side, and how Hashem communicates through this. And so now here is the Zohar, which I mentioned in Shul. Here's the Zohar. This is in Chelek Gimel Daf Reish Tes Vov, and it's in Zohar Parshas Pinchas. So I'm going to point with the cursor, but I'll go straight into English. Yossi said, the keshes, the rainbow, comes to protect the world. L'malkot, compared to a moshel of a queen or a king. A king, whenever his son would be a sin against the father, so the king wanted to punish the child, and the matronisa, the matron, the mother, I presume, comes along wearing royal clothing, and the king sees her, and then the anger subsides and he rejoices with her, and that's the expression uri siho lizkoibris oilam. So the idea of the rainbow here is coming as like a queen would come in fancy clothing to appease the anger of the king. So that's
Dayan, is this supposed to be on the screen?
Yes, and it's not there, so I didn't do share screen. Thank you for pointing that out to me. And now let's find it. Share screen. Oh, share screen. There we are. Is it there?
No, just
there we are.
Just yes, now. Okay.
Good. Okay, there we are. So that's I read the first paragraph, which talks about how the rainbow is like the queen, all dressed up and appeasing the king for the sins of her son. Then the Zohar continues. Reb Loza Omar, La'olam lo yislabish keshes do elo belavusha de alvohon. The keshes is wearing the garments of the avos, Yorik v'sumek avon kadmoy, the avos, Yorik v'sumek v'chiver. That's green or blue or yellow, whatever you want, but it's one of those. V'sumek, which is red, and v'chiver is white. And then the Zohar goes into more detail. Yorik, the green is the garment of Avram. Why does Avram wear a green garment? It's tabel of Ushadok had Nofak when Yishmael. When Avraham had a Yishmael who then goes off in a not good way, so then Avraham looks like he turns green, and that's why he has a green garment. Sumko Dogavan Yitzchok. The red, it is related to Yitzchok, and what's Yitzchok to do with the red? Because Kadnofik when Esav, because when Esav was born, well, sorry, when Esav goes in a not good way, so then Yitzchak turns red out of blushing, and so then Esav, and that's why he has a red garment. And then and he says that redness of the garment of Esav, or of Yitzchak, which is because of Esav, has to do with the koich v'damadim, to do with the star of Mars. The Isachid be Esav. Esav relates to Mars. Chivra, and the white is do'iyu levusha tova de Yaakov. That's the beautiful garment of Yaakov. Doho lo ishtini apanpoyili almin. He never went through embarrassing changes of face. So that's the first part of the Zohar. And then Reb Abba says to Reb Elazar, very beautifully said, however, Yos, who well said, so said the holy light. I believe that is a euphemism for Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. No, he says, so according to the first version, the white Avraham is green, Yitzchak is red, and white is Yaakov. The second opinion says, this Reb Abba is saying, no, Chivar Doyer Avraham, and the white of the rainbow, it relates to the garment of Avraham, who wore white clothing. Why white? Because he was thrown in the furnace by Nimrod. That's when his clothes become white, like because of like the ash in a fire, so the cloth will become white. Sumkod or Yitzchak Vadai, the redness that relates to Yitzchak, and he's not arguing with the previous one. And finally, Yorek Dohu Yaakov. And the green alludes to Yaakov, the Kaima Beitrein Gavne, because he was able to sustain the two colors. The Kesubah Yaakov. Now, this is a beautiful drush. We have a posuk. Loi ato yevish Yaakov, loi bota ata bon upon Yechivaru. Yaakov is not embarrassed, his face won't turn white. That's the posuk. Why is Yaakov not embarrassed and not his face doesn't turn pale? The Hakor al Shalim Hava, because his whole bed remained intact. All of his children remained on the Derech HaYosher. And this is how we should read the pasuk. Lo Yata Yevosh Yaakov. Yaakov won't be embarrassed to turn up with a red color. As his father Yaakov doesn't turn red like Yitzchak, who when he had Esav went out of him. And neither will Yaakov's face turn white. Nor will Yaakov turn white like Avram turned white in relating to Yishmael. I think those words means he takes the various colors to have the crown of his father and grandfather, or of Ilain Levushim Mislabeshes Keshes. So it's with the combination of the three colors which correspond to the others. Then you have here this is the rainbow. Bishaita de Eschazikal Memalko, when it comes before the king. As mentioned before, it's like the queen coming before the king in beautiful clothing. So the Keshes is presenting the Mebishten, I guess Eden, etc., in a more beautiful way, and in that way pleading for them to be forgiven and not be etc. Okay, so that's the Zohar. So the Zohar only talks about three colors, and also in the Maimah today mentions about the union of the three colors. It doesn't go into the other four of the seven colors. Okay, let's go on to a practical question. Now that we know exactly the colors of the rainbow and the significance of Torah. Right here. Okay, a bit late, but the question is, it comes up every few months. What is exactly the announcement of by Birchas HaChodesh? I'm not going to go into too much detail. Sometimes the Gabba would announce Mochor, when he says Rosh Chodesh so and so, Mochor b'yom, or b'yom Shabbos ula Mochorase. So what are the rules on this? And there's a whole thing that everyone wrote a letter, and then he asks for more details, and there was a lot of discussion. So if anyone wants the full discussion, I can send them by email, but just keep it brief. And I want to say that when I was thinking about it last week, and I was thinking, where would this be recorded? Where would Minhag Chabad be recorded? What exactly should be the announcement? And I have good news for those Gaboim out there, that there is in the pipeline, there is a Gabai's handbook, being produced by America, by Kahos. America's, I'm not sure exactly which one, but it's being produced, and I've been involved with it. And at any rate, so this is how the announcement would be. When Rosh Chodesh is on, when it's a Shabbos, when we read Mochar Chodesh, so then by the announcement of Birchas HaChodesh, so we'd say Mochar. In other words, when Shabbos is the 29th of the month. When Shabbos is Chav Gimel, and there are 2 days Rosh Chodesh, so then we would say Rosh Chodesh so b'yom HaShabbos u'lemachrosa b'yom HaRishon. And the logic for this clarification, u'lemachrosa b'yom HaRishon, so Reb Motel Schusterman, who was a Balkoida by the Rebbe, so he explained that when you've got Shabbos on the 23rd, then you have a Sunday, which is the 24th. And when you announce Rosh Chodesh is going to be B'yom HaRishon, someone might think, oh, but B'yom HaRishon means tomorrow. So therefore, when Shabbos is on Chav Gimel, you clarify that when we say B'yom HaShabbos, we don't mean tomorrow, but we mean Shabbos and the following day. I know it's fairly evident, but sometimes you need to connect. Okay, let's go on to someone that's asking whether this is connected to Yosef's multicolored coat. I don't know the answer to that, and we'll have to leave it for but as Hashem, until we get to those parishes, perhaps we may find some source for it. Let's move on.
According to Rashi, it wasn't a multicolored coat.
Exactly, it was just made of pieces, right? Made of pasim means each piece was made the size of a palm, right? Someone's asking, why would you have the word mochar added? I think it's got to do with, since we're celebrating the inyan of mochar chodesh, therefore we want to, in the hachroza, we also want to mention the inyan of mochar. All right, let's move on to the next question. Quite a serious question. So here is the following. A fellow asks me, in Geman or Shliach, that he is a chaplain at a hospital. Because of COVID restrictions, chaplains were allowed to be by bedsides of patients only in end of life. The request which he's trying to advocate is that chaplains should be permitted to be able to attend patients even when they're not in end of life, and to give them care, etc., as chaplains would do. His hesitation is that his plea, if it were successful, would allow also chaplains of other faiths. So by asking for indulgence for the Jewish chaplain, he's meanwhile also facilitating other faiths to administer their care. And is that a good idea? That was really his question. So it was actually quite a challenging question. So what I was reminded of, which I'm going to share with you in a moment, perhaps some of the correspondence, was in the 50s or perhaps even earlier in America, it was a standard thing that they would say a prayer in school at the beginning of the day. Around 1962, I think, there seems to have been, if I get the dates wrong, so what. So there seems to be in Long Island, they had introduced a much more neutral kind of prayer. I'm not sure whether it was a moment of silence, but there was some kind of prayer which was totally non-denominational. And then there was a whole discussion, and a lot of Jewish movements actually were opposed to it, and they felt that this is going to be pushing non-Jewish agendas onto the Jewish students. And the Rebbe, on the contrary, was actually very supportive of it. And in that conversation, so the question is going to be, by kind of encouraging this, what's going to happen? Does that mean that the Christian is going to be then strengthening his faith and the faith of his children, etc.? This is kind of the question. So let's first deal with the Din Shulchan Aruch. This is in Siman Kufnun Vav and Erechaim. And it's talking about after davening, finish Kriyas Torah, all those dinim. It's before the dinim of Netilas Yadayim. So it's talking about after you've learned and you daven, you've learned. So then the next thing is you go out to your work. So then this is the mechaber in the block letters, and then in the small, well, in the bold face, and the lower part is from the Ramo. And the question is, if you're going to make a partnership with a goy, so the mechaber says you might then land up with causing the goy to, at some stage, to swear, and when it will come to court, he will swear by his faith. So you have kind of brought him to an act of Avodah Zarah, to express his faith in Avodah Zarah. So that's the position of the mechaber of Yosef Karo. But then the Ramo, who we Ashkenazim, we follow the Yosef Karo. And he says, because the goyim, he says, when the goyim are swearing, they are swearing with their God, which is Shemayim. They mean the Eibishter, together with something else. And he has this line, Ein hagoyim muzhorim al hashituf. That goyim are not forbidden to serve Hashem together with something else, together with serving some other deity. Now, this is the way the Ramah presents it. And there are those who say that it's got to do with, doesn't mean shituf as in Trinity. It means a Jew having a partnership with a goy, that kind of shutfus. But this is certainly the way the Ramah presents it, that for a goy, Trinity is permitted. And therefore, if you're going to make a Christian swear and it's going to invoke in Yonim of Trinity, that's okay for him. And this is certainly their view, which is followed in Chassidus, that in Achtus Hashem, the mitzvah of Hashem and nothing else besides Hashem, that's Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The mitzvah of Achdus Hashem, that you only serve Hashem and nothing else alongside, no tandems, that is for Yidden. But a goy to serve Hashem alongside something else is permitted, and therefore you are allowed to, the Ramah says, you are allowed to make a partnership with a goy, even though you'll end up possibly that you'll have a court case and he will swear with his faith, which is, as I said, Trinity. That's not called causing a michshol. Now, so that's the background here. Now, the Rebbe, you're going to see here, this is a correspondence. This is in Shulchan Menachem. You can see the page where it is. There's several pages about this. Fascinatingly, the Rebbe had a secretary by the name of Rebbe Elio Kvint. And this Rebbe Elio Kvint was not a Chabadnik at all, but he was actually a very impressive Talmud Chacham, to the point that he's got a 3-volume set of Sforim called Menuchas Eliyahu. And I looked this up in the Shulchan Menachem. They give a reference to the page number, and in his Sefer, he has a whole discussion, and he has the dates of the discussion. In the early 60s, he took the view that you should not be having this prayer in the schools because of the problems which I mentioned before. It's going to have also enabling goyim and to strengthen their faith, etc. And then I don't know why, but he says he spoke to an Admur, he spoke to a Rebbe who's very active in promoting Yiddishkeit. He doesn't say the Rebbe by name, which I don't know why. I mean, if his job was as secretary of the Rebbe, why was he hiding behind it? At any rate, and then he says, and it's the same dates approximately as this letter. It's Tammuz Tov Shin Chof Beis, and when the Rebbe spoke about this in public, and how the Rebbe encourages the prayer in school, notwithstanding the risks that it may have that goyim will also pray in their way. So I'm reading now the last paragraph on this, which you have in front of you. The second last paragraph. At the end of your letter, you're concerned about the Isur, where it says you should not make a partnership with a goy because of lo yishoma al picho. You should be the cause that a goy should mention Avodah Zarah. So first of all, the Rebbe says, I beg your pardon, but first of all, it's not so straightforward. And as I mentioned, just showed you that Ramos says, if a goy, you're allowed to make a shutfa. So the Mechaber says not, then Ramos says you are allowed to. Even even those who say that you should not make a partnership with a goy, which is the shit of the Mechaber, that's because the goy will mention also in his oath, he'll mention also Isahish, etc. Mash'enkim bin down when we're talking about the prayer in the school, which, as I mentioned before, was a non-denominational prayer. And he says there the discussion in Shulchan Aruch is a profit of money to make a partnership with a goy, whether you're allowed to make a partnership to make money, obviously. But here we're dealing with what's at stake here. You got tens of thousands of Yiddish kinder who are going to public schools, and therefore months and for weeks and months and years, and you're saying we should deprive them of saying a prayer in case a goy will say Shem Shemayim, and he might have in his mind, it's because it's a non-denominational prayer, but what he might have in mind, Oisayish, and the Rebbe says that consideration is not really a fair consideration. And so coming back to our question about the chaplain, I think we have here, strong grounds to say we should be pushing that the chaplain should be able to look after a yid. What will happen? There might be a repercussion that there will be another faith, another cleric will come and push something else. I don't think that's enough of a reason to deprive a yid of having a chaplain, a Yiddish chaplain coming to him in those crucial, when it's in a crucial moment. I just want to finish off. I have it on the side. We have this posuk. I remember once Chief Rabbi Lau quoting this in the context of people of different faiths. And we say this every day as we are finishing davening. We're saying before Shir Shel Yoim, and we're about to go out to the street. The other nations, they will go each one to their respective faith. And we will go out with our faith in Hashem. Let's move on to the next point. Okay, so then I mentioned previously, sometimes these things come in droves. So similar points come up. So here, this is the next question is actually from a shliach in somewhere in Germany, where the community own a plot in the local cemetery, and it's got a mahadrin fence around it with hedges. That's not the problem. The problem is that before as a funeral is done, usually they would be using a chapel of sorts, and then they would do some kind of services there, and then take the body for kvura. At the moment, there's only one chapel there, which is, and they are able to use it if they wanted to. And the question was, should the community spend the money to make their own chapel, or could they use this quote-unquote multi-denominational chapel? No, the fellow sent me a video by email or by WhatsApp, and you can see the Salem number 1 and Salem number 2 and Salem number 3. Oh, I must tell you this, Avremi, you're going to enjoy this. One of my Malamed told me that he was from Switzerland, and there's this Catholic hospital, and there's this kid who's in hospital, his brother, and there's a getchka in every room. And the next morning, the nurses come in and they see that the getchka is covered with a blanket. So they were all furious. So the little boy's 8 years old. He says, in the middle of the night, he was shivering from cold. They put him over a blanket. It shouldn't he be so cold? And the whole hospital was, tickled pink, as they say, with the story. At any rate, so here we have this this question where they can use that room and they can cover it with shmatis. They can take it out. So this is the question. So when we talk about a multi-faith facility, so strictly speaking, if it had not been consecrated for a chapel, just being lechatchila, it had been made as a multi-faith, there would be room to be makel, to use it. But if it had been consecrated as a place for for a Catholic, whatever it may be, Protestant, doesn't make any difference. If it be consecrated for a place of worship, just for out of their kindness, they're allowing other faiths to use it. So is nish beseder. It shouldn't be used. It's the Poyle, I spoke to him out later in the week, and they've taken the view that they're going to make their own building, and they shouldn't have to use it. But yes, right. And here you have on the screen now. Just one moment. We have on this
airport and a hospital.
Pardon?
I'm going to ask Dayan Raskin the same thing about hospital or hospice. They have multi-faith rooms, and you look in the shelves. They usually have different.
All right, I'm going to come to that in a moment. I want to also speak about the multi-faith place in the airport. Yeah. So I'm going to come to I'll repeat the question, and then we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's just look at the, this is in Siman Kuf Nun Daled. Now this is the Mishnah Berurah, which you have over here. And where I'm pointing to, Inyan Lasois, mi base Tifla, Shel Akum, base Hakneses, to make, there's a kavanah here. We don't say Tefillah. Tefillah means to connect, and Tifla means Shtusim. So to take from a base Tifla of Goyim, and to use it as a Shul, there are the Mogen Avrom, based upon the Re'om, Rabbi Yoel Mizrahi, he says it's okay because the house itself hasn't been worshipped, whereas the El Yorabo, he says, no, you shouldn't make a shul out of it. That's another whole discussion of actually transforming an old church to make it into a Beis HaKnesses. Right, so now coming back to this multi-faith facility. So now, what I'm saying is, in the case of the chapel out there in the base in the cemetery, strictly speaking, you could use it if it was lechatchila made as a multi-faith. Now, coming to the places in the airport, and then I'll perhaps take your question, Reb Aryeh. Yeah, you come to the airport, and they've got signs, and you go along there, and you see a fellow kneeling on a carpet, and you go the other way, or you start davening, and the guy comes there with his carpet. But I want to look at the piece of Shulchan Aruch, and this is in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. Do I have the reference here? No, sorry, I'll have to give the reference later. I think I'm not sure which page where it is, but you're traveling and you're near to a Goyshe hotel where you're going to now. The question you have here a choice: do you daven on the roadside, or do you wait till you get into the hotel? So you have a choice. You can daven in a quiet place at the roadside, or you'll daven in the hotel, a Goyshe hotel. So he says better to daven at the roadside than to daven in the hotel, because bevade there are in the hotel gilulim v'toyevos, and you shouldn't bring a dover shebikdusha in a place where it's gilulim v'toyevos. As you know, I'm sure many of you, in many hotels, if you open the drawers, you'll find a Bible with a New Testicle stuck inside also. So now, where do we see this? Because Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Sholem, when he went to daven, he went Katsesi Sa'ir, he left the city. He didn't want to daven in the city of Mitzrayim because it was Malay Gilulim. Then the Alter Rebbe says, if even on the roadside you won't find a quiet place where you won't be disrupted, then you should daven in the hotel, in a corner where you shouldn't be disturbed by the Bnei Habayis. Don't worry about the Gilulim, because Kol Tfilos saying about Yoris Meleis Gilulim, wherever we daven, we've got churches all around us. And therefore, so this is what I'm bringing here. If you have a choice, you have a choice to daven in the hotel where there are Avodah Zaros, or you have another place where there are no Avodah Zaros. So choose to daven in the place with no Avodah Zaros. And this is where I'm looking at this and thinking we have this multi-faith prayer room in a airport, and you open this cupboard, it's a Quran, and this cupboard, it's a dos, and here is a Krishna, whatever it may be. Perhaps I shouldn't say that word. So then you have here Sifrei Ovdei Gilulim. You can go to some unused, departure lounge. I'm getting rusty with all this not flying such a long time. So you go to unused departure lounge. You see a lady, you can daven there, Barum Menuchas HaNefesh, And so you can find a quiet place instead of davening together where there are those things. And therefore, when you have that option, I would say don't daven in the prayer room, daven in a place where, a quiet place where you don't have Avodah Zorahs just within your Dal Damas. So now, Reb Arya, you want to tell us your question about the hospital and the hospice, which I'm less familiar with. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I was just going to suggest in hospitals, every hospital has a faith room, a multi-faith room, and specifically hospices, which is end of life. They definitely have them. And if you go into them more, I went into one just recently, and there weren't getchkas as such on the walls, but there is always a Sforim shunk, a cupboard with different people's books, and you usually find that someone at some point has put in either a siddur or tehillim or something within it. But it is definitely a multi. I don't think they'll get shkers in their dafka. I think it's made for everybody.
Right. So what I'm thinking is that, strictly speaking, so I understand this. That doesn't come in the recording. Your question. So the question is that in hospices there are prayer rooms, and they may not have any icons or anything on the walls, but there are books of various faiths in the cupboards there. And is that an issue to daven there? So what I'm seeing here is it's not our preferred option. Our preferred option is where there's no Avodah Zorahs, even books of Avodah Zorah over there. If that's not available, then if that's the only place, then you could use it, because as you say, clearly it's been made as a multi-faith. It's never been consecrated for one particular faith. I want to share with you a little anecdote. There was once a multi-faith meeting here in London, and my brother-in-law, Reb Levi Sudak, was invited. And it was going to take place, and I think in the Roundhouse Church thing, but it was meant to be multi-denominational. And he declined the invitation. The next day, he met one of the people who did go, and he says, "Rabbi, I should have taken a page out of your book." That was what happened there was in this Roundhouse unused church, whatever, one of the Bnei Dodim, as they call them, one of them, a Muslim, some imam or someone, came time for whatever they call it, and he rolled out his carpet and he got down on his knees. And so one of the priests or whatever, I didn't say mamash hagam lichbesh samalka imi baboyis, but something on those lines. How can you do this in a place which is consecrated? So it wasn't so neutral, it was as it was tabled. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Someone at the beginning of the week also asked me. He asked, is there a problem with the Kesubah being written on parchment in Kesubah Shuri, in the writing of the Sefer Torah? And he heard something about the Munkacher, and he heard something about the Nachlas Shiva. I spent time searching for this, so I didn't see any objection of using parchment for a Kesubah. I want to tell you something practically, though. Practically, thank you, Reuven, that the sif which I just quoted from Simon Tzaddik Daled, which talks about the direction of tefillah. Thank you. These people spend in great sums on getting these fancy ksubas. Usually, the people who write them are more artists than qualified in halacha. And then if someone makes a signature wrong or fills in a detail wrong, they've got this fancy ksubah, and you feel very bad for them. They've got to spend so much money, and it's not kosher. So really, I wouldn't promote them. I would encourage more use the more simple one, and then afterwards you can put it in a fancy frame. At any rate, but that's not the question. The question was someone had written a kesubah, and it was in a ornate thing written on parchment in Kesubah Shuri. So now, the name Nachlas Shiva, if you want to look at a sefer of shtoros, the Nachlas Shiva is one of those svarim which specialize in shtoros. I did find a quote in Nita Gavril about the Munkacher, in the actual source which he quotes from Siddur Shai Yisoch. I didn't see it quoted, but at any rate, let's go through what I do have here. So we have here, this is from the Ramah, and you have the reference on the notes. It's the end of Simon Reish Pei Daled, and the Ramah says, Yesh oimrim, de ein lichtoiv dvorim shel choil b'chsav ashuris, shekoisvin boi haTorah. One shouldn't write mundane stuff in the Ashur script, which is used for Torah, and therefore there is certainly a reluctance to use the Sefer Torah writing for mundane stuff, for invitations, etc. It shouldn't be used for that. And possibly the fact that so many Sforim were published in Rashi writing rather than in block writing may have been part of the consideration that the Ksav Ashuri is the block writing, which is kind of Ksav Ashuri, should be for Torah Shebechsav, etc. At any rate, certainly for mundane stuff, we have here the basis of not using Ksav Ashuri for mundane stuff. Here we have the second quote on the page is a quote from Likutei Sichos, Chav Daled, and he says, "Tzorich iyun," whether it's advisable to use letters with the tagin, with the crowns, other than in stam in Sefer Torah Tefillin Mezuzos, especially on a text which is not going to be kept, it's going to be thrown away. Even though when it comes to the square writing, the block writing, poshat ato ha'het, nowadays, unfortunately, but Ksav, the block Hebrew writing is used for all kind of trash, etc. Even though in earlier generations there was a tendency to use Rashi writing rather than the Ksav Ashur, the block writing, because of this respect that this is the script for using the Torah. The third quote I have here is from the Be'er Moshe, the Debretziner Rov, and he writes the same idea. Those hachadoshim mikorev bo, to make an invitation, kriyo shel chiba, is very nice to use ksav ashuris mamish, and I'm sharing this because you often see people use the ksav ashuri for invitations, and also even in newspapers they have sometimes notices, and it shouldn't be done. It should be kept for now. I didn't find anyone talk about a Kesubah specifically. A Kesubah is obviously a document which is going to be kept with great respect, but it's not a holy document. It's a document it's a money document, really. So I would not encourage to use it. If it's done already, I don't think there's a problem to use it once it's been done already. Okay, let's take a look at the chat questions. A few things over here. Okay, I'm going to just read out the questions. So back to our previous question, someone's pointing out that the carpet is not really the same as Christianity. That's true. And he mentions Mo'oras HaMachpeil Yochiach. There's actually a lot of discussion whether you're allowed to daven in a mosque. And the view is that you shouldn't daven even in a mosque, even though the Muslims are they're not into Trinity or anything like that, but it's still a place which is their worship. You shouldn't be davening there. Moras Machpelah has got a special discussion. I can give you references for that later. Okay.
Rebbe davened there when he went.
Pardon?
The Frierdiker Rebbe davened there when he went.
Yes, but I don't know where perhaps that's the other way around. They came into our gvul. They didn't consecrate it. It was our place. Yeah.
The whole thing was a mosque then.
All right. I don't know the details. I know there's a lot of discussion about this. Right. Let's move on. If it's complicated, I can't deal with it now. Reb Aryeh Freeman tells us he was instructed not to use tagin when he would write ksubas, etc., and not to use a special pay or ches, which would be unique to Ksav Ashuri. Right, let's move on. Okay. Right, let's move on. I just don't want to take up so much time. We have another few things on the list. Oh, yeah. Okay, so now the next question here is that someone that in one community, a Sefer Torah tragically fell, and as the minhag is to make a fast, and the community, the people who were present there, would fast. And so the question was about reading Vayachal. So on a regular fast day, which we have 5 times a year, we have fast days besides Yom Kippur, and so in the afternoon we'd read Vayachal, in the morning we'd read Vayachal, etc. So now here you have, this is from Siman Tov Kuf Samach Vav, the Dinim of Tanis, and he says, there is talking about when a fast would be instituted, not this is extracurricular fast or on Bahab, etc., after Pesach and after Sukkot. So he says the Rishonim, they would say, the Shliach Tzibur would say Aneinu, and they would read Vayachal. Then going down, lower down, others disagreed. Let's go back again. Now, he says there's the question like this. There's sometimes a fast which is made because there's no rain. There's some other gzeira, and you want to dispel a gzeira. And then there's another type of fast which is out of tshuva. Now let's read that in the second part of this paragraph. Varosh yishev kushyosum hilkach leminag rishonim shoymin amiu. If the fast hasn't been instituted to avert a looming gzeira, elo lashuv b'tshuva, to arouse in tshuva, yesh noyagim ladune betane ketanas tzibur inyan anein vayachal, etc. Yesh noyagim ladune ketanas yochit. So here we have, and this is what we're dealing with here. The fast after the Sefer Torah fell, Rahman Litzlan, is not to avert a gzeira, which is looming, but rather to arouse tshuva. And therefore, the first opinion says that you do say vayachal, and the second opinion says that you don't say, you wouldn't do kriyas haTorah. You don't have aneinu, and you don't do kriyas haTorah. So this is my question: how are we noyig? How should we follow when we have these two opinions in the Shulchan Aruch? Whether a fast which is only for tshuva, not for averting a gzeira, do you read vayachal or not? So I pulled out the Sefer of the Sefer Darkei Chesed, written by Rabbi Ushpol, who was the Rav of the Chevre Kadisha of Agudas Chabad in New York. And he writes, the Chevre Kadisha have a minhag to have once a year a fast day, different minhagim which day, and they would. He says that we at Sif base mekabel mataynis b'mincha shalafonov. This is the reason for the fast is that they're worried in case they hadn't treated the mason with adequate respect. So this should be an atonement for and etc. But it's a chance of tshuva. It's not a chance for gzeira. And he says that it would be a kabbalah satainis, and after chazor sashat say slichis and read vayachal like a regular tainis. So what I'm seeing here is, whereas in the Shulchan Aruch there are two opinions, the Darkei Chesed is saying that you would read vayachal by a tanis tshuva, like the first opinion in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, I also saw in the Munketcher in Darkei Chaim B'Sholem, he specifically addresses a case where the Sefer Torah fell and the fasting, and he says that they should read Vayachal. All right, so that kind of is very clear that one should say Vayachal. Why was I all apprehensive? Because I remember this is Tovshin Mem. I'm a young bocher, and it was the first time I heard of the Rebbe making that should be a fast. And I think it was the first time, there may have been earlier years before my times, but the first time I remember that the Rebbe should say we should encourage a fast, because Bechal in Chabad, Bechal Derech Chassidus doesn't encourage fasting, and therefore it was very surprising that the Rebbe encouraged there should be a fast. And so it was a Tanis choice. And it's Shabbos Parshas Vayishlach, Tovshin Mem. And Vayishlach, so I think this fast was meant to be a day or two before Hanukkah. And just I remember the picture, because, and you have the Hanocha here in front of you, that the Rebbe said that if the fast will go in the afternoon, Satanas shows, if they will daven mincha early, then it might be that you read Vayachal. Nesanenu and read Vayachal. The Rav with Paskin and something, if the Rav will Paskin, that we should say Vayachal, etc., etc. And so the Rebbe kind of put the Rav in a spot. Rebbe Salman Shimon would sit by the Fabrengen in the Shvil just in front of the Rebbe. And it was as if Rebbe Salman Shimon was going to, right after the Sikha, announce exactly whether we are going to read Vaychal or not going to read Vaychal. And you know, my sympathies are with him, because as I say in Chabad, the idea of having how should say, an extracurricular fast was a totally new thing. Anyway, at the end of the Farbrengen, whoever it was, Rabbi Pinchas, whoever announced, the Rov hat gebeten übergeben, als ein sein in das und morgen übergeben, wie man es aufzuführen sagt. Or something, he gave an announcement that he'll look into the Shaila and he'll later give out directives of how to be noyeg. So here you have this shtickle where the Rebbe says, but at the time it was like, it was so cute how Zalman Shimon, yeah, he has to answer, but he has to look into it and then he'll come back later. Okay, let's move on. And what I remember was, it said they didn't read Vaychal. That was what I found it interesting, because the Rebbe seemed to have been kind of zoning in that they should read Vaychal, and the point wasn't. The only thing is that possibly Reb Zalman Shimon had a cheshbon because it wasn't a full fast. It was only a l'shor, it's only a half day, and then we've got a machlokas b'chlal where they should read Vaychal, not read Vaychal. The challenge says Shuvah. Perhaps he combined the two, and as a result, he didn't. He said not to read Vaychal. As far as I know, I mean, I heard that Reb Zalman Shimon would often have speak on the telephone with the Rebbe. So possibly before he made that announcement, he had spoken to the Rebbe also. Reb Shmulu adds that first of Slichas Tovshin Lamed Beis, there was a fast, and they lane Vayachal, and the Rebbe had an Aliyat Mincha. Okay, all right, that was 18 years before this event. Okay. I wasn't wearing short trousers in Tovshin Lamed Beis, but it's for far minor Zeiten. Thank you, Rabbi Lu. And thank you for joining us. We didn't see your Shabbos. I hope you're feeling well. Okay, let's go on to okay, the next Shiloh was a Ribis Shiloh, which I don't have anything on the screen. Okay, this Shiloh was like this. Somewhere in Europe, possibly they don't have a proper Jewish cemetery there. As you may know, in France, for example, you don't get there's no freehold on a kever in France. It's all leasehold. After 100 years, they have the rights to reinter or whatever. So a lot of, certainly Anash over there, but they bring their mason to Eretz Yisrael. And this wasn't in France, another part of Europe. And there was an iftar, and it's a lot of money to taking a body to Eretz Yisrael with all the costs involved. And Reuven laid out the money. He laid out in dollars and in Shekolim, so they're paying for the airfare and for the kever in Eretz Yisrael. So he laid out the money, and now eventually the heirs had managed to they want to now repay him. So they want to repay him what he laid out. Because of the exchange rates, it works out that if they would give him. So what Reuven had money in his bank account, which was in euros. He drew out money. Well, he paid perhaps with a credit card, but it was deducted from his account in euros. So let's say he was laid out 10,000 euros for whatever it was, and now if they were to pay him back in dollars and Shekolim as the actual
pick them up fast. And there's a whole bedroom now. Well, you also. Mom is standing here washing up.
Mute all.
Pass in a few minutes.
Right. So now if they would pay him back the money in euros and in Shekolim and in dollars, and he'd buy euros, he'd get, instead of 10,000 euros, he'd get a few hundred euros less because of the exchange rates have changed. Perhaps the euro is now stronger, whatever it may be. So this is the question. Can they pay him back that he should have 10,000 euros, or can they only pay him back the amount in Shekolim? They can pay him back in euros, but only the Shekolim and dollar thing. And the answer is, whether you like, unfortunately, depends which side you are, but they could only pay back in the amount of Shekolim and dollars as was the original advance. The issue here is that the debt, the issue of ribis doesn't allow a debt to grow. And if he had given them X amount of dollars, they mustn't give him back any more dollars. So many Shekolim, they mustn't give him back any more Shekolim. The fact that now those Shekolim and those dollars will buy less euros is well, that's I guess that's the costs of the mitzvah, but they wouldn't be able to reimburse him that. What would happen if the other way around? If the euro had gone down and now they're going to give back Shekolim and he can buy more euros, nobody's going to complain then. So no, you win some and etc. Neighborster will reimburse him in a good time. Let's move on to a shiur of yichud. So someone's asking that his niece has come from overseas, and because of concern of corona, his wife is very, very concerned. So his wife has left the house and gone to her parents, and the niece should stay with them. So now that's the story. Is a problem of yichud. Can his niece stay with him when his wife is not home? And does it make any difference, the fact that his wife is in town? So I want to clarify that there are the various deterrents which protect from the Isur Yichud. One of them is Ba'alo Ba'ir, and that's what just for simplicity I took from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. For a man to be alone with a woman, and her husband is in town, that serves as a deterrent. So long as only by gospel, so long as they don't have a very familiar relationship. So Isha Shabayla Ba'ir, her husband in town, serves as a deterrent, and Yisur Yichud does not apply. By a man, Ishtoi Ba'ir is not enough of a deterrent. Ishtoi Imoi, if his wife is mamish there in the house, then there can be another woman in the house. But Ishtoi Ba'ir does not work. So I just want to clarify that, as this way you have the second quote from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. So the deterrent for a woman is Ba'ala Ba'ir, deterrent for a man is Ishtoi Imoi, and therefore, in this question, that my wife is not home, even though she's in town, that's not enough. As I sometimes say to Chassanim, men are much more mashuga than women. Okay. We have two more questions on our list. I'm getting towards the end of our list in any case, and of our time, I mean. Okay, so here I have a question number 9 on the list. Someone's asking me, he has a dental brace, but it's not visible, and he doesn't wear it all the time. Is there an issue of wearing it on Shabbos when walking out in the street? So we have, well, that's significant, the fact that it's not visible. If the denture is part of, without it, when you smile, everyone sees how many teeth you're missing. So then that's a tachshit. That makes you look more presentable. And you are allowed to wear a tachshit. That's like you're allowed to wear a garment. You're allowed to wear something which makes you more presentable. The downside of this particular case is it's not visible. It's further back in the mouth, I guess. And it's to help him to able to chew his food, and so he doesn't wear it the whole time. It's not so comfortable. He only wears it. That should complain to his dentist. At any rate, he wears it when he eats. He wears it. When he doesn't eat, he doesn't wear it. So it could be he'll come to shul, it'll be a fabrengen, be something, but he doesn't really. And I've perhaps mentioned this on the shiur before. I sometimes talk about this halacha, what's called wearing and what's called carrying. And it's interesting because in Yiddish and in French, we have the same, we have ich trage un mantel und ich trage a valiske. In French, je porte un manteau, je porte une valise. So the same word is used for carrying and for wearing. And the difference is, in my mind, carrying means I need it not now, I need it later. I'm transporting it from here to there. Wearing means I have the fulfillment here and now. I know you can pick holes in that theory, but broadly speaking, I think it's correct. So if he would be wearing this denture because for comfort, etc., then he could wear it in the street also. If because he might have to chew a hard piece of kuchen by the fabrengen, okay, so leave it at home. Right. Someone's asking, is it true that the Rebbe did not want any implant teeth because of milchiks and fleishiks? Apparently so. And there's a beautiful story of which Reb Tzvi Gimwald would say of the Erloyer Rov, who met the Rebbe Rashab in some spa in Austria or somewhere, and the Rebbetzin saw, so Motzei Shabbos, it was, and the Rebbetzin saw how they were really getting along very well, the Erloyer Rov and the Rebbe Rashab. And she asked the Erloyer Rov, my husband refuses to do any dental work, and he suffers a lot of pain because of it. And he has some frumkeit, which reason he doesn't want to do any dental work. Can you possibly, I see he respects you, try to prevail upon him that he should allow dental work, and he should alleviate all this pain. And so the royal Lerov, he was leaving the following day, and as they kind of bid farewell, and he says, Lubavitch Rebbe, if you don't mind, a personal question. And he goes into this conversation and he says, discusses la Halocha, and he says in his Hungarian Yiddish, about, milchiks and fleischiks, etc. It's only a remote concern. And so the Rebbe Rashab answered him, sometimes you have a shayla and a chicken and you paskin one way or the other, you paskin's kosher. It's a one-off. But here, a chashusha, but day in, day out, I can't manage to live with a chashusha day in, day out. It was once on the Living Torah interviews, they had this story. Yeah. Let's finish off. Glasses is with the same thing. You can wear glasses if you are wearing them to use them, but because you need reading glasses in shul, that's not a teretz to wear them through the street. Let's finish off because we're running very close to the end of our slot. Students on campus are hesitant to put up a mezuzah because they're worried they'll be targeted. And so the shliach says that he's designed a kind of box which looks like one of these safe boxes, a key storage safe, and it will look quite innocuous, and to put on in the place of the mezuzah. Is that okay? So we have here now again a quote from Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, where there's a concern that the mezuzah might get stolen. So there's an option of carving out in the doorpost, in the door frame, to carve out and put the mezuzah inside there. Don't put it too deep. It shouldn't be more than a sefer deep, because then it's not called al mezuzahs. It's inside. That would be possible. And then also, it should be noticeable. And then if for some reason you could not put the mezuzah buried inside the doorpost, then there's something which is called a choyre hadeles, which to put on the mezuzah on the inside, on the doorpost on the inside. So yes, so coming back to this question, to have this mezuzah looking like a safe would be legitimate. It's better than having a choyre hadeles. If there's some way of doing some artwork that it should also have a shiur or something which should kind of, to the yid who looks at it, should see that this is a mezuzah, that would be obviously preferable. Okay, I wish you all a good tavoch, and now we're going into Lech Lecho. It's a feilige parsha, and so we should have a simchas olam al rosham, mit simchas hageula, mit Moshiach Tzidkeinu, b'meher v'yameinu mamash. A good tavoch.
Good tavoch,
Good tavoch.
Shikach.
How do I get back to switch this off over here?